I'm Danielle Smith, president of the Alberta Enterprise Group, and I'm collaborating with Common Sense Edmonton as we interview candidates for the upcoming election for Edmonton City Council this fall. Joining me now is Giselle General, who is the candidate in Ward 7. Giselle, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yes, now we are transitioning to new ward names, so why don't you tell us the name of your ward?
Absolutely. I'm a West Side girl, always here in Edmonton, and I'm running for Ward sipiwiyiniwak.
Do you know what that means?
Absolutely. And perfect timing, actually, because the city of Edmonton has also been publishing informative and beautifully done educational videos. And the one for Ward sipiwiyiniwak was just published yesterday. So this name was chosen to honor our neighbors here in the West Side, the people of the Enoch Cree Nation. So it references the life and the culture of the people of the River Cree, which I think is a very appropriate name for our ward.
All right, let's talk a bit about your ward. Maybe you can tell us, first of all, why it is you've decided to put your name forward to run for council.
Absolutely. So since I came to Edmonton in 2008, coming from the Philippines, I've always lived on the West Side and have experienced firsthand all the transformations that happened here. There was a period of time that people don't even know that there's parts of the city with the numbers 200 and up. And that's where I lived. So seeing all the development in the city, changes in services and transportation, and all these really incredible changes, I really think that Edmonton is a great place to live for people like me who are starting from scratch, trying to build our lives from the difficulties that we have faced growing up. And I feel motivated making an impact in the community. That's always been part of my upbringing and inclination, even as a child in the little mining village in the Philippines where I'm from. And I really think that I wanted to participate actively in the election race to fight for platforms and perspectives and improving the services that will help the everyday people.
All right. Well, the job of a council member is to oversee the administration and provide direction. So give us some idea of your career and the life path that you've been on that makes you qualified to do that.
Absolutely. So I came from a small mining village in the Philippines, and we were living a simple life until I became an orphan. My parents and sister died in a horrible car crash. And since then, my grandma and I took over the family business. So that's probably my first line in my resume, business owner since the age of 9. I know about business concepts before puberty because we needed that to survive. So, childhood business owner, so really good knowledge of how businesses work, in addition to my Bachelor of Commerce degree from the University of Alberta. I also use firsthand many of our city services. I cannot drive, so I'm really passionate about public transit. I volunteered for 3 years with the Edmonton Transit Advisory Board to share how transit can be improved from a citizen's and a transit user perspective. Very passionate about my community. Here in Edmonton, we have the community league system, right? So I've been helping out in various capacities for about 5 years now. And I dabble on other causes as well, such as hair massacre. I grow my hair out every 2 years to donate it. I get stabbed at Canadian Blood Services on a regular basis to donate blood. During the pandemic, I was helping other seamstresses using fabrics to make laundry bags for healthcare workers. I'm a volunteer columnist with the Alberta Filipino Journal, and I've been involved in various nonprofit committees and boards, including the Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues. So I would argue that my lived experiences, my community service experience, and my career, I work at the Edmonton Community Legal Center, helping with the pro bono programs for low-income people. So have pretty decent experience working with people of all walks of life, including lawyers. So
it's a long list of things that you're involved in. So maybe this is going to sound too confining, but what are the top 3 issues that you're hearing about in your ward?
So the top 3 issues that I have been hearing about in the ward is transportation. That is the terminology that I prefer because that transit is a big component of it, but it goes beyond that. So street lights and sidewalks and back alleys that need repair and new neighborhoods that need roads and sidewalks to be built well the first time, and proper snow clearing. very, very important because we live in a winter city. So transportation, both when it comes to infrastructure and maintenance, is a very, very important thing that I would like to really advocate for. Second is hyper local amenities and services. So from the neighborhood strip malls to the playgrounds and the community league halls. So these different amenities that we experience immediately within 5 minutes after we step out of our homes. This is very important and also within the jurisdiction of the municipal government. So this is something I'm very passionate about and a very good fit for my candidacy. And the final one is about community safety, which policing is under the umbrella of this. So just making sure that we have proper processes so that every single Edmontonian, no matter who they are, how they look, how much money they make, or what is the nature of their concern, that they will be heard, be treated with dignity, and that they feel that justice will be provided for the concerns that they have.
All right. We're going to get into some of those community issues in just a minute and the policing issues, but I want to just take a step back and ask you from a general perspective before we get more specific. When you look at the, we'll talk about spending issues and tax issues. So when you look at the level of spending that you see at the city, do you think it's too much? Do you think it's too little? Or do you think it's about right?
From what I've been hearing, there is issues as well. Like it can be argued that there is too much spending. There was an audit that was published, I believe it's about a year or 2 years ago, shortly before the pandemic, that demonstrated, like with actual real numbers, that there's too much middle management. Beforehand, I have to admit, I thought that people are just exaggerating and making claims, and maybe they just don't understand how government works, because there is a structure, there's a bureaucracy. But when this audit came out, I was shocked and very concerned, because all of us, no matter whether we're renters or homeowners or business owners, we do contribute to the municipal tax base. And what I feel optimistic about it, though, is that there are tangible action items to manage that buffer, I suppose is the right word, the excessive middle management positions. And I really hope that by closely implementing what is recommended in this really well done audit, that we will have a little bit more structure that will be able to address the spending issue.
All right.
Yeah, so that's my overall take on that, and hopefully it helps resolve our spending issue.
Let me talk about two other aspects to that, because one other aspect is the issue of all wages and benefits and pensions for frontline staff. And so on a given year, even if there's a freeze, if you move up the pay grid, you're still going to see higher staffing costs. Do you think that there's any issues that need to be dealt with in collective bargaining agreements with staff?
Something I would confess, because I'm an immigrant, I'm still trying to learn in greater detail how unions work. I mean, there's a reason why they have been established in many places here in the West, like it's been a significant part of the history of the United States and Canada. And they have made significant positive impacts when it comes to workplace culture. And that's why they say many hands make light work when it comes to a campaign. I needed people who are more knowledgeable on this topic. We are researching on it together so we can factor in information from political analyst perspective and from the numbers, so we can see what is the issue here. Because maybe I'm oversimplifying, but for me, all I care about is to have good programs and services, and for the people who deliver those programs and services to be treated well. So proper benefits, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And the concept of pensions, I didn't really know that until I came here, and it sounds like they're a good thing, right? So there's a lot of these perspectives that I need to understand, so that we can have a more strong answer and definitive outline in our platform closer to election day.
All
so
right.
Yeah, I hope that I'm not really just like evading it, but yeah, it's like more research is needed, and I know I need to do that.
Totally understand. What about city councilors themselves? Have you had a chance to look at what they're paid, and do you think it's about right?
One thing that I wish any counselor has done is to tabulate how many hours they work in a week, because right now, some people argue that they work 60 hours a week, and that sounds like a really busy job. And perhaps because of that, the compensation might be appropriate. My current salary right now, I work in a non-for-profit, right? So if I end up getting elected, it would be a pay bump either way. But I really need to, yeah, I'd like to understand better what the job entails in terms of volume of hours, because it sounds like counselors that like work really hard, you see them on weekdays and weekends. Maybe it's actually appropriate, but there are counselors that you hardly see and talk to. So there's definitely a range there. It's a bit of a tangent, but one argument I've heard of is that there perhaps the counselor's salary should stay the same or a bit lower, but the resources to have staff that helps elected representatives, maybe there should be more of them, because the city keeps growing, and for a very long time we continue to have 12 city councilors despite the massive growth that the city has had. And for me, in my day job, I like to respond to correspondence really quickly and be attentive to my constituents. But that might be tough if I get 50 emails a day while there's a city council meeting during that day, right? So yeah, like as far it sounds like a big number. I know it's almost like $130,000 if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I will look into it more to see what it entails, because if they're working 80 hours per week for 8.5 months out of the year, maybe it's reasonable, because they might need to do other things to outsource their certain things about their life. But yeah, I just really hope that whatever the amount is, it's our constituents really feel that their elected representatives respond really quickly. They get their money.
All right. Yeah. You started off talking in identifying the three issues that you cared about the most and you're hearing the most about by asserting, and this is in the area of municipal jurisdiction. I'm wondering, does that mean that you think that there are some things that the municipal government is doing that they shouldn't be doing? Are there any areas that you think that should be cut?
No, that's a really interesting one, because one really prominent example of this right now is homelessness. Right. I think it's argued that it should be the province's jurisdiction, but the impacts when it comes to leaving this unaddressed is really felt in the municipal level. If there's a lot of people who are sleeping rough in the LRT tunnels, the city needs to deal with that, and I see that on a regular basis when I take the LRT going to downtown Edmonton. And if there's challenges when it comes to transit infrastructure, you need to address the root of the problem. Seniors is another area where it's technically the province's jurisdiction, but there is like a city councilor liaison that helps and has a lot of engagement with seniors. I mean, we are all people, we are people with different needs, and it's not as straightforward to always compartmentalize our needs, because they are all interconnected. Racism is one of them. So yeah, I'm trying to still really reflect on this. I've been talking to my fellow campaign teams, doing research and whatnot, because also as a person, I'm a get it done kind of person. So if there's a problem, I feel really motivated to do whatever it takes to fix it, to improve people's lives. Mm-hmm. So, it's not, I apologize, it's not a straightforward answer, but whoever has the most inclination and the resources and the motivation to address whatever is going on in order to help our community, why not? And if that takes reviewing who is supposed to be the actual responsible jurisdiction, that is also a worthwhile discussion.
All right, let's look at the other side and how you pay for things through taxes. So I've got a few questions for you on taxes. The city of Edmonton froze property taxes for the first time since 1997. And but however, it has gone up quite a bit since 2000. The average home was paying $910 in taxes, and it went up to 2,586 by 2019. So let me ask what you think should be done on residential and business taxes. First of all, do you think that both residents and businesses should pay more?
Oh, that's really a difficult question. I really think that, and again, I'm gonna make a claim here. Like, I'm not a numbers expert, right?
Mhm.
That's why I needed input from whoever is the expert on the numbers to really determine what is the best approach. I was really relieved when there was a, when taxes were not increased for 2020 for very understandable reasons. We are in a pandemic, and at the same time, I would be open to discussing a freeze as well for 2022, because it takes a while to recover from the difficult year that we just had. We just need to, any form of collaboration that, not just between the orders of government, but other creative sources of income can and should be explored. I think there's a concept called PPP. Still trying to wrap my mind around that. And if that is a great way to fund any projects without, passing it on to the taxpayers in a, rapid succession in the next few years, that is also worth looking into. I know that many people are very passionate about their perspectives. That they believe certain services should always be funded by the government, or certain services should, that the government should have nothing to do with. But again, for me, whatever gets the job done in a way that provides the most benefit and least harm to people, like, that's what I will be okay with doing.
All right. I just want to make sure anytime someone says an acronym, I want to make sure I know that what you're referring to. When you say PPP, you meant public-private partnerships?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, perfect. Let me then talk to you about new tax revenue. From time to time, when there's a discussion about city charters, for instance, it often accompanies a discussion about whether the city of Edmonton needs to levy new taxes. Do you think they need new sources of revenues?
I believe so. Any opportunities is definitely worth exploring, especially given that in Edmonton and Calgary, in many places in Canada, there's this terminology I've heard a few times called senior tsunami. Where we're having a much larger population of seniors as the years go by. Many of them have fixed incomes, and of course, if they love their family home and they want to continue living in their home, they have a fixed income, but increasing tax rates that they have to pay, that is unsustainable. And I think this is where more improved collaboration between all orders of government is worthwhile. Perhaps that can help identify ways to generate more revenue, whether it's by supporting other industries that have great potential and are what's the word I'm looking for, up and coming industries, supporting them with incubators and all supports to make sure that they're thriving. And once these companies are thriving, there's opportunities there for other sources of revenue. So that's basically my preliminary thoughts on the topic.
It sounds to me like you want to grow the base by having more people and more businesses, as opposed to levying a hotel tax or a parking stall tax or a land transfer tax. These are the type of taxes that exist in other jurisdictions. Have you looked at anything like that?
Yeah, I think you've articulated pretty well that just looking at increasing the base is what I'm more leaning towards, mainly because I'm not sure if you had a chance to read the City of Edmonton's city plan. It's this big document that is anticipating, because it will happen. Edmonton will continue growing. And the city plan documents strategies at different stages to prepare for the city to have a population of 2 million within its current boundaries. So the city of Edmonton is not expanding anymore. We're not sprawling and acquiring more land. It's just building within the borders that we have. So the base will be here. We just need to prepare for it and make sure also that through whichever programs and services that we offer as a city, they and we can have a prosperous life here because that will help us contribute properly to the tax base.
Let's talk a little bit then about housing, because I do want to talk to you about the 15-minute community concept, and also talk about the idea of growing out versus growing up, because there is a bit of a tension between those two things. But first, let me ask you about affordable housing. And when I use that term, what does that mean to you?
Because of where I work, it's something that I'm pretty familiar with. So affordable housing is the type of housing where people who live there pay only about 30% of their income towards the rent. So for instance, if someone lives on H, I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact number right now, but for the sake of an example, let's say someone on H gets $1,000 a month for their living expenses.
I think it's 1,500. It might have increased with inflation, but I take your point.
Yeah, so yeah, $1,000 just to make the math simple for me.
Okay.
Yeah, $1,000 a month. So their rent would be $300. The big affordable seniors housing providers here, they have the same formula as well. So if CPP-OAS combined, they also, just for the sake of example, they get $1,000. Their rent would be $300, and the of course, like, that's not a lot of money in order to maintain apartments and stuff like that, and that's why these services need to be government subsidized. We need more of them, absolutely, and it's tough because the devil is in the details, but we need more of them, and also they need to be maintained better, because that is something I have observed as well, from stories from our clients and whatnot, that many of these currently existing affordable housing units are in terrible shape. It's tough. It really affects your quality of life and your sense of dignity when, like, sure, maybe you pay $250 in rent, which is not a lot of money, but that doesn't mean that you have to put up with a house with bed bugs and non-functional windows and a stove that doesn't work. So yeah, it is a complicated issue, but from what I can see from the individuals that live in these affordable housing units, yes, we need more of them, and they need to be maintained better.
All right. Let's talk about the affordability from another aspect. First-time home buyers often like to live in new suburbs, which are more dense, and it just to be able to get into the housing market at a more affordable level. So do you think that there needs to be a balance between building up and staying within the borders versus growing out into new greenfield development?
Yes, this is something I completely understand too, because that's what my elders did. All my aunts and uncles who came here to Canada, came to Edmonton before me, even the ones who actually brought me over to Edmonton, this is what they all did, is they bought houses in the suburbs where half of the neighborhood is still under construction. And because what they see in front of them is the price tag, right? And unfortunately, they have not factored in all other considerations like public transit, because that made things difficult for me as a university student going to the U of A, taking an hour to get there a couple of years ago. Anyways, but yeah, there definitely needs to be balance there, because and perhaps, what's the word I'm looking for? Incentives. I think there is, now I live in a mature neighborhood where the population is definitely either stable or dropping, and that really affects things such as the population of our elementary schools and how much of a customer base do the local strip mall and businesses have. And in places like mine, I know there is a good way to do infill. We should not just write it out altogether. There's ways to do row housing, and with creative architecture, there's definitely ways to build apartments that blend in with the nature of the neighborhoods. And there's a lot of millennials like myself, my peers, and those who are younger who don't even want the idea of owning a home, but having reasonably affordable condos or townhouses or co-op units, co-op facilities in the more centralized parts of Edmonton. We also need to encourage this more.
Okay, let me talk to you about the 15-minute community concept. Where do you think some of the deficiencies are? What do you think needs to be focused on to achieve that vision?
I have a lot of perspectives on this because, yeah, I used to live in a neighborhood that is definitely not the 15-minute community, and now I live in one where it certainly is, and it's quite remarkable.
Hmm.
I think some of the deficiencies that I can see, and this is from the perspective of a transit user who cannot drive and would really benefit from having everything close around me. The first one is sidewalks. There are times when getting to the grocery store that is probably like 10 minutes from where I'm living is, like this is in my previous neighborhood, is really difficult because it's not safe to get there on foot. I would have been more than happy on a regular basis to go there, get the jug of milk, have it in my bag, and walk back to my house. But if sidewalks are not available, sometimes some neighborhoods they don't even have sidewalks on both sides of the road of the road, and that's dangerous. If snow clearing is another big one. When thinking about a 15-minute city in a city like Edmonton, this perspective needs to be all season long. So, clearing sidewalks and roads properly is very important. And by roads, I mean not just the pathway where the car passes through, but also the little islands that sometimes get built in between, and it becomes a little icy hill for us pedestrians and wheelchair users and walker users to surmount. That's really difficult and dangerous. So, like having that perspective of walkability is really important, and I think sometimes is missing because many cities here in Canada have a more car-centric way of things. But
Mhm.
if you wanted to think about people with disabilities, people who can't drive like myself, people who are newcomers who cannot yet afford a car, and our growing population of seniors. I would love for the seniors who live in my neighborhood to always, all season long, feel comfortable to go to the salon that is in our business strip mall over here, or go to the butcher shop, or to go to the to our bar. But it needs to be safe for them to get there on foot.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Let me ask you another development question before we move on to a few of the other ones. The city is conducting a large development in the former airport lands area. It's called Blatchfield, or pardon me, Blatchford. What do you think of this project? Do you think that the city should be in the development business, or do you think something else should happen there?
So that is something that I'm also asking my research team to help me like fully understand. But some of the commentary I have heard so far is that many people who were initially excited about this felt a little bit discouraged because the pace of development has not been as fast as they would have wanted. Um, when it comes to like whether the city should be a part of the development business or not, again, I've been delegating more research to my team because I wanted and I needed, again, I've been here for just 14 years. I wanted to understand and needed to understand the historical context of the city being involved in development projects. Has it always been a disaster, or has there been success stories? Is Blatchford an outlier, or is there a consistent pattern here? So those are the things that I wanted to find some clear answers for before I make a feedback that they should stay completely out of it, or that they're actually doing a good job.
Okay, no problem. Let's move on to talking about the economy, because I think, notwithstanding COVID, we've had some tough times in Alberta for a number of years now. What do you see is the opportunity for Edmonton to be able to attract new business?
I think there's a lot of what I call up and coming industries that hold a lot of potential, and it's a bit awkward to be honest, but I sometimes consider the post secondary institutions here as technically an industry, if that makes sense, because we have so many post secondary institutions here where students are learn and try to build a good life, and making sure that our whether it's our businesses and zoning and housing and stuff like that works for these post-secondary students like me, and we get convinced that Edmonton is a great place to build their careers and stay and be here for the rest of our lives. I think that holds a lot of potential. Other industries as well that I think are very promising are it's still my opinion under the umbrella of the energy industry. So that includes green energy and um, solar panels and that kind of good stuff, because there is momentum there. There are people who are leaning towards using these sources of energy. And, again, a business person, if a customer wants something, you might as well provide something to give it to them. So I think that's something that needs to be explored. The food industry as well, like agricultural, is something I've been hearing. There's a lot of potential. Credit to Councillor Piquet, who's been advocating passionately about this. And finally, the tech industry. My little brother is an example. He graduated with a diploma in digital media and IT. And just with our way of life now, there's so much involvement of technology in everything that we do, and encouraging through incubators and tax incentives if necessary, or programs. Innovate Edmonton, I believe, is one of them. So making sure that these supports are available. And if you actually lay that out, like that's a pretty wide range of industries. If we're able to tap into all of these, on top of the Edmonton being, the capital of Alberta, and we have, the government over here as well. I think there's lots of opportunities for people to be prosperous and have a good life here.
And what about oil and gas? I mean, the Leduc oil find is not far away from Edmonton. Do you think there's still good jobs to be had in oil and gas?
I believe so. I'm also the type of person. Let me take a step back. For additional context with my personal upbringing, I lived in a place where the industry is mining. So, it's we mine like gold, silver, and copper and nickel, and we acknowledge that it's an industry that has environmental impacts, and that we also need to plan for that, right? So I understand people's anxiety when their livelihood is, at risk. I think that in the short to medium term, there is still lots of potential in the energy industry. Like, it cannot be ignored. It's not like we can just chop it off and completely stop. But a simultaneous effort, I think, would make more sense, where making sure that whatever is the potential of the oil and gas industry, we still need to pay attention to that, while at the same time we are able to, or we should, Edmonton should look into other industries and opportunities that help address our environmental concerns.
All right. Let me ask you about a contentious solar project, the EPCOR solar project in the River Valley. It passed, but only with a 7-6 vote. If you'd been voting on that, how would you have voted?
I would vote no,
Why?
particularly based on the location. This is probably not like a very, politically polite answer, but quite frankly, humans are not always the greatest at preserving natural areas, if you know what I mean. Like, a lot of the times when it comes to building stuff that affects a natural area, many people have good intentions, where like, we'll minimize the impact and we'll make sure that wildlife and whatnot will be okay, but there is usually always unintended consequences. So that's where I lean towards avoiding development in or near the River Valley as much as possible, unless there is really no other alternatives. I really acknowledge the reasoning behind it being built there, because of the proximity to the other facilities related to EPCOR. But there's a part of me that wonders that perhaps other buildings that maybe have a vacant roof, or top floor, maybe we could put the solar panels there. And I'm not like a super technical expert, I do admit, but that's where I was really concerned and disappointed.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Let me just ask one more question on the issue of business attraction. Some municipalities look at the idea of attracting businesses with reducing taxes and regulations. Others look at providing direct subsidies. Do you have a preference?
I do not. I do not have a preference. It really depends on what makes sense with the industry, and what type of behaviors that the municipality wanted to incentivize people to do. Do they want people to set up shop there for the short term, to just activate the area? Do they want people to set up shop and be there for the next 100 years? Is it an industry that is so swift and quickly transforming that it is better to provide certain kinds of subsidies and programs so that they can take risks, and that if their experimental invention, for instance, produces like zero revenue, they can still continue and make better prototypes. It really depends on the industry. One thing that I feel optimistic about is there is now plans and discussions to have a collaborative inter-regional perspective when it comes to building incentives. I'm sorry, I cannot remember the actual acronym of this initiative right now, but it sounds like at least here in Edmonton, the municipalities in the greater Edmonton area have acknowledged that competing against each other, like Leduc versus Nisku versus Edmonton versus St. Albert, is not really productive. And it's probably a good idea to work together to provide incentives so that the business owners or whoever wanted to set up shop will determine which is the best location for them, or perhaps encourage people like, yeah, Edmonton's actually a better place for you because of all these benefits. Yeah.
All right. Let me ask you about something that you've already made reference to that you feel quite strongly about, which is transit, because there have been a lot of delays in the LRT, the Valley Line Southeast, significant delays during construction. What is your understanding about the reason for some of those delays, and do you have any suggestions to make sure that other big projects like this don't fall off track?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the pain literally every time I take transit. My goodness. I've been listening to different sources to understand how it works, and one of the takeaways that I heard that I frankly didn't even consider is proper communication in the beginning. Like scope of projects and timelines and things like that. Especially with the signaling system, right? There was so much dispute regarding the signaling system for the Kingsway Royal Alex, the Nate line, essentially. And as it turns out, it was revealed afterwards that what the city was looking for, which is a signaling system that should work well with the old signaling system that we already have, is ineffective and unrealistic. It's like maybe dishing out the bad news earlier on is better than being blindsided about it afterwards. So I think that is one point of improvement. That everyone should just be upfront and communicate whether what the city is looking for is realistic or not. So this is more on the bidding process, like the request for proposal stage in the beginning. I think that will save everyone a lot of headaches. Another thing that I'd like to suggest, and this is not just like with transit, frankly, it's all other kinds of infrastructure and capital projects of the city, just communicating regularly to the general public. I've heard from another city councillor who I talk with or I engage with on a regular basis that many of our projects, infrastructure and capital projects, are actually on time and on budget, but it's human nature for us to zero in on things that go wrong. I think it's a good idea to provide more opportunities to celebrate things that have also worked really well. Because if things are properly done 80% of the time, I think that's pretty decent. So that's my thoughts on that.
All right.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I am interested in knowing if you have a better way of approaching transit, because there's big plans to build other lines. So Valley Line West, Metro Line Northwest, Capital Line South. Do you think this further LRT expansion is the way to go? Or do you think there's a better way to support transportation in the city?
I guess there's a few expansions that I'm really looking forward to. The west one, I'm from the west side, so there's a bit of bias there, but I am excited to be able to take the LRT to West Edmonton Mall maybe in 10 years. But yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. And also the LRT line to the airport. I'm not sure how long it will take for us to get there, but I have been in a few cities where there is a very direct and swift and efficient transit option from the airport to the downtown of the city, I think that holds a lot of potential. With that being said, I know that there's other ways to build reliable transit. BRTs is definitely something that's talked about on bus rapid transit. My neighborhood is one of the ones that had the on-demand transit pilot project. And so because I need it, I've been using it about 65% of the time of all my transit trips. And I think there's a time and place for on-demand system. So I thought that's really interesting. I think we need to expand our thinking when it comes to transportation options. So yeah, there's probably maybe at the bottom level some on demand, some neighborhood buses, frequent buses that we now have, and then LRT to certain parts of the city. The I guess one I guess frame of thinking that I would really recommend all our transit planners and perhaps also policymakers is like seriously think about it from the ground down, from the perspective of a public transit user, because I think that sometimes gets missed. I know that there's not a lot of us, about 13% of the population take transit, but this is essential to our lives.
All right, we've got a few final issues. I kind of look at this as a bit of a grab bag because they're just ones that I want to make sure that you have a chance to weigh in on. Let's talk about the issue of privatization. Half the city's garbage collection is private. Should the city be in the business of operating golf courses? How do you feel about the private sector delivering some of those things?
Oh, that's a really, really interesting question. Quite frankly, again, maybe this is the immigrant in me, right? Like I was confused when I realized that a municipality offers golfing. I was like, oh, okay, and recreation. That is something I needed to learn and adjust to when I came here. I think that, but again, my research team might prove me otherwise, right? Essential services that help people, function daily, like transit, I think should always be public or as public as possible. Same thing with garbage collection. When it comes to the recreation stuff, I'm still need to research and think about this. Maybe again a public private partnership might be worthwhile, or maybe just to pass it on privately altogether. Again, my research team might prove me wrong, right? Yeah.
Perfect. Let me ask you about the residential speed limits going to 40 kilometers per hour last year. Some want to drop it to 30 kilometers per hour in the future. What would you want to do?
I support it because this is again from the perspective of our seniors, right? We are going to have more seniors who might be walking around the neighborhoods and they might not have as much reaction time as we wanted to. Many people have been showing the research when it comes to how likely are you going to survive when you're hit by a vehicle at different speeds, and that I don't drive, right? So quite frankly, because of the fact I don't drive, I do not completely understand the inclination of people to speed and the impatience sometimes. I honestly don't get it. I guess because also my husband's probably a responsible driver. I've never seen him get impatient at the intersection or a residential road. But yes, it's usually from that perspective, like the slower speeds in certain types of roads, particularly in neighborhood roads, can help with reducing fatalities, increasing reaction time, especially in our icy roads in the winter. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
There was also a movement in the last year on defunding the police. What does that mean to you?
For me, defunding the police unfortunately has caused a lot of angst, right? It's one of those words that really like riles people's emotions, depending on their experiences with the police force. The terminology I prefer and I think is more appropriate is police reform. And we definitely need that. Yeah, it's definitely overdue. I think I mentioned before, like my, quick little phrase when it comes to community safety, right? I believe that everyone, no matter who they are, how they look, the nature of their concerns and where they came from, that they feel safe and respected when they contact the police for supports, and that, they feel, a sense of dignity and justice, that their concerns will actually be addressed. and we are definitely not there right now. So I think and I think the terminology for myself, police reform, also provides a lot of flexibility in terms of solutions. To a degree, yes, perhaps shifting funding from police force to affordable housing might make sense, or having or keeping a certain amount of funding for anti-racism and anti-sexism training. That
Mhm.
might be a good idea. And if you spend a certain amount of money, but within the department, that's not exactly taking funds away, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So that's my overall impression on the topic, and it's something that is really complex and nuanced. And I really hope that closer to September, we'll have a really strong position on it, on tangible items we can do.
All right. I'm looking at a picture here of the library downtown, the think
Mhm.
tank. Do you love it or do you hate it?
Um, depends of the time. It depends on the time of day, actually.
Oh, really? Does it look better at certain times of day?
Yes, it's really. If you look at it at night, it does look like My I should share my husband's joke about this. It's a Star Trek reference. Um, yeah, USS Library, I believe, is how he calls it at night. Because we've gone. This is before the pandemic. We've gone to the theater to watch some shows and whatnot, and we would walk by the library, and it's quite a sight in the evening. In the daytime, I think that's where people find it a bit off-putting, because personally for me, as far as architecture, I like texture and like vibrant colors is what I prefer. Especially as a winter city, we have enough gray-looking things most of the year. I would have preferred it to be colorful. But I've also heard many people who got really sold and really, really loved the changes in the interior. And I
Mm.
really hope I get to visit soon.
Okay, perfect. Just a couple final questions about how you see your role as an elected council member. So, in the first case, there is going to be a referendum on equalization in conjunction with the municipal election. Can you think of any municipal issues that you would put to referendum, or do you think that it's your job as a council member to make all the decisions that come up at the city?
Ooh, referendums. I think what I will actually do instead is ramp up a lot more my engagement with constituents to
Mhm.
inform my decisions. This is one of my platform points, actually, one of my motivations why I'm running, because I think that Edmontonians, especially residents of sipiwiyiniwak, deserve to have an elected representative they hear more from on a regular basis through all platforms and all events, and all methods of communication. And I really hope, but I have I have an idea of how frequently and in what method I will engage with my constituents, that would always inform how I conduct myself as an elected representative, and when faced with decisions done at council.
Okay, one more, because there'll be times when the city administration recommends a decision that they say benefits the city as a whole, but your constituents will want you to vote the other way. What would you do in those situations?
Ask questions why,
Mm.
because it's really important to understand why why the constituents are anxious about it. Is it because of lack of engagement? Is it because of biased views about the biased and problematic views about the bylaw proposal, for instance? Is it because people are afraid of what will be the impact, and that, as it turns out, the impact is not what they think it is? Yeah, it's really important to ask why first before making a determination. Infill, that will happen very frequently. If I get elected, there would be a lot of um, you know emotionally charged conversations when it comes to densification and adding city services.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the conversation today.
Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate the opportunity.
That is your candidate for Ward 7, sipiwiyiniwak. Her name is Giselle General.